Once you have your clock synchronization set, now you have to decide if you only care about precision, in which case it's not so bad, or if you care about accuracy. As soon as you care about accuracy, you're asking the question, does my system's clock match the outside world's time? And that gets very tricky. Time zones were originally created in the UK for rail schedules. They had a problem that each train station on an east-west line had a different local time because the sun rises and sets at a slightly different time as you go east or west. And they had trouble coordinating train schedules because they had to deal not only with the travel time, but with the fact that every station actually had a different time on its clocks. And so the original time zones were to synchronize clocks across groups of stations. These days, more or less, sort of less, we'll get to that, time zones give you 1 hour differences between different groups at different longitudes. Now, the more or less, the tricky part is it's not necessarily whole hours. For example, India has a time 5.5 hours away from the reference, and Nepal has a time 5 3/4 away from the reference, and there are a couple other places that do this sort of thing. So software that assumes all time zones are exactly 1 hour apart won't work properly in those areas. Another issue is that daylight savings time is an arbitrary government construct. So this is the idea, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, you spring ahead and you fall back. But in World War II, the US went to permanent daylight savings time, calling it wartime. And also in the so-called energy crisis, the US went on permanent daylight savings time. Even within the US, the rules are not consistent. Arizona, for example, does not observe daylight savings time unless you happen to be in the Navajo reservation inside Arizona, which does do daylight savings time. But there's the Hopi Reservation, which is inside the Navajo Reservation that does not do daylight savings time. So if you pick the right road, you can drive in and out of daylight savings time several times on a single road trip. Another quirk with daylight savings time is that the dates differ by location. In 2007, the US and Europe changed the dates they switched to daylight savings time. So there's a couple weeks in there where one of them is on daylight savings time and one isn't, and all the time differences between the countries change. Also, don't forget that spring ahead and fall back has to do with the local season, and the seasons in the Southern Hemisphere are inverted to the seasons in the Northern Hemisphere.